All right, ready to dive deep.
Always.
Today, we're tackling a name everyone's heard of, George Armstrong Custer.
Synonymous with the Wild West.
Exactly. But most people only know about the very end, right? Custer's last stand and all that.
Right, just the very last chapter of a much longer story.
And that's what we're doing, diving into his whole Wikipedia page to get the full picture.
Way more to him than just that one battle, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, before we get to the drama of Little Bighorn, what was Custer like early on?
Before the Civil War, even.
Yeah, his Wikipedia page mentions West Point, but it doesn't exactly paint him as a model cadet.
Let's just say exuberant was putting it mildly, even back then.
Oh, how so?
We're talking about a guy who racked up over 700 demerits at West Point.
The 700s.
700. Graduated dead last in his class. Makes you wonder, greatness or disaster waiting to happen.
Last in his class. But he becomes this cavalry legend. Seems like a contradiction.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But generals like McClellan, Pleasanton, they saw something in him.
What? Beyond the, let's say, enthusiasm.
They saw past the disciplinary issues, recognized his bravery, his tactical mind.
Okay, but 700 demerits suggests he did things his own way, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. Like this story, early in the war. They're scouting, trying to figure out how deep a river is.
Uh-oh, I can already see this going off the rails somehow, knowing Custer.
Right. General Barnard says something like, "Wish I knew how deep that river was."
And Custer, being Custer?
Charges right in. On horseback, into the middle of the river.
No way.
Stops, turns around, shouts back, "General McClellan, sir! That's how deep it is."
What a combination. Showman and soldier, all in one. But it obviously worked for him, Brigadier General at 23.
Youngest in the Army at that rank.
Can you imagine serving under a general barely older than you are?
He definitely made an impression. And it wasn't just his age.
Yeah, the Wolverines, right. His Michigan Cavalry Brigade.
Exactly. He really leaned into his image when he took command of them.
Oh yeah, the uniforms. Weren't they known for their distinctive look?
Absolutely. Bright red neckties, those broad-brimmed hats, often with a feather.
And of course the long hair.
He wanted to be noticed, a beacon on the battlefield.
It's almost theatrical, isn't it? Like he understood how powerful it was to be instantly recognizable.
To inspire his men, to intimidate the enemy. He knew what he was doing.
So he's already this larger-than-life figure, even before we get to his actions in the Civil War.
And while people jump straight to Little Bighorn, his role at Gettysburg was crucial.
Really? What made Gettysburg so defining for him?
Well, it's easy to forget. Gettysburg wasn't just one big battle. It went on for days.
Oh yeah, good point.
And even before the main clash, Custer's already making a name for himself.
Really? How so?
Skirmishes, right. With J.E.B. Stuart's cavalry.
Trying to stop them joining up with Lee.
Exactly, delaying them, throwing a wrench in the Confederate plans.
So even before the main event at Gettysburg, he's already having an impact.
These smaller engagements like Hanover, Abbottstown, they matter.
Not as famous as Pickett's charge or anything, but still.
They show Custer's tactical mind, how we could disrupt,
And then it all leads up to that big cavalry battle, right? July 3rd, East Cavalry Field.
That's the one. Custer's legend really starts to take shape there.
It's wild thinking about everything happening at once, right?
Pickett's charge is going on around the same time.
All those poor guys marching into that meat grinder.
Exactly. But while everyone's focused on that, Custer's got his own fight.
Against Stuart's cavalry.
And Stuart's force.
Yes.
The largest the Confederates ever assembled.
Talk about being outnumbered. No wonder they call it Custer's last stand.
Well, that one's later. But yeah, at Gettysburg, the odds are stacked against him.
So what does he do? How do you even approach that kind of fight?
Custer?
Yeah.
He probably loved it. A challenge, right? But seriously, he had a few things going for him.
Like what?
First, his leadership, pure and simple.
Yeah.
Inspired his men. They'd follow him anywhere.
That showmanship probably helped. Got to stand out on a battlefield that chaotic.
Exactly. And second, his tactics. New cavalry warfare inside and out.
Hit and run, use your speed, all that.
Precisely. Plus, the Union cavalry, they had better horses, better equipped overall.
Trying to picture it, though, thousands of men, horses, the noise must have been incredible.
And remember, the cannons from Pickett's charge are booming in the distance.
It's like something out of a movie, just overwhelming.
Custer's in the thick of it, leading charges, getting knocked off his horse at one point.
Wait, what? He gets thrown?
Yeah, almost captured, but he managed to escape.
Narrowly avoids becoming a prisoner. That would have changed things.
Big time. Anyway, he rallies his men, keeps fighting, just relentless.
And against those odds, they hold their own.
They do more than that. They drive back Stuart's attack.
Wow.
It's a huge turning point, not just for that battle, but for the whole war.
Gettysburg, the turning point of the Civil War. That's what they say.
And Custer, he's right at the heart of it. Shows what he could do as a commander.
Even with all the chaos, all the violence swirling around him.
Exactly. So you'd think with the war over, he'd take a break,
You
right?
enjoy the peace, become a national hero.
You're talking about a guy who lived for action. And speaking of which, there's this story about Custer and a racehorse.
A racehorse. What in the world? Okay, now I gotta hear this one. Okay, so Civil War's over. Most folks be ready to relax, but this is Custer we're talking about.
Right. Peace and quiet. Not his style.
And you were about to say something about a racehorse.
Oh, yeah. So picture this. It's 1865. Lee's surrendered. Everyone's celebrating.
Victory.
Exactly. And Custer, he hears about this horse, this legendary racehorse, Don Juan.
Don Juan. Okay, I already know this is gonna be good.
This horse, it was supposedly worth a fortune, belonged to some Confederate sympathizer.
Uh-oh, and the war's over, but
But that doesn't matter to Custer. He decides he has to have this horse.
who doesn't?
Oh, he does. Sends his men to, shall we say, acquire it.
He steals a horse after winning the war for the Union.
Pretty much. And it gets better. You want to know what he does with this stolen horse? He races it.
Classic Custer. Rules don't apply to him, do they? It's almost admirable in a way.
Well, that's one way to look at it. But it does make you wonder, did he even see it as wrong?
It's like he lived by his own code, for better or worse.
Definitely for worse, in some cases. Anyway, this whole thing with the horse is just one example.
Of him pushing the limits.
Exactly. Which brings us to, well, the West.
The final frontier. What takes Custer out there?
After a short time in Texas, he gets command of the 7th Cavalry, set out west.
Into the thick of it, right. All those conflicts, the expansion, everything.
And Custer, you know he's not going to sit on the sidelines.
This is where things get really complicated, right? Especially the Battle of Washita River.
Washita, yeah, that's a tough one. On one hand, it's a military victory.
Against the Cheyenne, right.
Right, but
Yeah.
it was brutal, even for that time.
Custer's reports claimed, what, over 100 Cheyenne killed?
Men, women, children. The accounts are heartbreaking.
The Cheyenne obviously have their own perspective, but either way, it's a dark chapter.
Definitely. It's hard to reconcile with the whole heroic narrative of westward expansion.
Things you question things, that's for sure. And then there's the Black Hills and gold.
Right. 1874, Custer's leading an expedition there. Lakota territory, by the way.
Always pushing boundaries.
And he sends word back. Gold's been found.
And the rush is on.
Prospectors flood the Black Hills, hoping to strike it rich.
Can't imagine that sat well with the Lakota.
You're telling me? That discovery? It directly leads to even more conflict, more violence.
Which ultimately sets the stage for Little Bighorn.
Exactly. But before we get there, there's one more thing we got to talk about. Politics.
Custer. Involved in politics.
Oh, yeah. He couldn't resist. Remember that scandal, the Belknap affair?
Vaguely. Secretary of War, right. Corruption, something like that.
Bribery, actually. Trading post contracts, lining his pockets.
Sounds about right for the time.
The thing is, Custer had seen this firsthand. How these trading posts exploited everyone.
Soldiers, Native Americans, anyone they could.
And he spoke out against it, pretty forcefully, too.
So Custer's the good guy here, fighting corruption. It's kind of hard to believe.
Some say he had his own ambitions, maybe even saw himself as a future president.
President Custer, now that's a thought.
Right. And speaking out against corruption, that's good PR.
So all these threads, the ambition, the recklessness, it all leads to Little Bighorn, doesn't it?
It all collides there, yeah. But that's a story for another time.
I guess some legends are just too big for one episode, even a deep dive like this.
Exactly. We've only scratched the surface of who Custer was, what drove him.
And maybe that's the point. History, it's not simple. It's not about heroes and villains.
It's about people, complicated people, just trying to make sense of their world, for better or worse.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the enigma that was George Armstrong Custer.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
And join us next time for another fascinating look into the past.